Hey folks, it's James, and we all know that the rise of 2D CAD and 3D rendering has revolutionized our profession, making everything faster and more efficient. But it has come at a cost. Many of us have stopped drawing by hand, and that's a real loss, not only because we risk losing the practice of hand drawing, but also because sketching is critical to developing your artistic vision and your design voice. The good news is that your iPad can bring sketching by hand back into your workflow. And today I'm going to show you how sketches I made in my iPad sketchbook helped plant the seeds for a design made years later for a couple who wanted to create a memorable house so their kids and their grandchildren would always come visit them in a beautiful town in Maine. Back when my traditional watercolor rendering business was dying because it couldn't keep up with the fast pace of change, I taught myself iPad drawing pretty much by trial and error, often creating imaginary designs like this project for a cabin in the woods just to test out all the digital brushes and all the digital editing tools inside Procreate and Morpholio Trace. In this project, and keep in mind that south is to the right in this sketch, the main idea was to create a great room with a living room, dining room, and kitchen all combined under an exposed gable roof in the spirit of one of those old cabins, but using modern materials. The second idea motivating all of this was to create a private courtyard with a hot tub in it that separated the bedroom areas, the primary bedroom suite, from any guest rooms or children's rooms. And you can see that courtyard in this little 3D study that shows you what I'm thinking about the massing, kind of a main central room and two little wings to either side of the courtyard. And since this was all in my imagination anyway, of course there would be a huge fireplace in the great room, and you can see that I'm already scribbling out furniture and doing a quick section because I don't want to get caught later on and learn that the section doesn't work. So I'm adding scribbles for the furniture in there. I'm doing everything to scale, but just using proportions and not actually using a scale. And here on the right side, I'm adding a quick elevation of the south facade. I love to work this way with a plan in the middle and different elevations off to the sides. And I'm smearing in some shadow and even going to introduce some color to bring this black and white sketch alive. And this makes it fun to try these different brushes and use them like pastels or watercolors, even though I rarely use pastels. But I'm not worried about how beautiful this sketch looks. I'm just worrying about learning about this app. And I'm already a professional renderer at the time, so I really have nothing to prove. And now coming back to the design part of the plan, I'm adding room names and door swings and some dimensions so I can start to calculate the area later on. And notice that these are all freehand and estimated by proportion because I don't want to slow myself down by actually using a scale, but I'm getting pretty good at this estimating proportions. And part of the fun I'm having here is that I'm inspired by those old brochures you saw from the WPA or back in the 50s. And you know, whatever motivates you is a good thing. So this is the way I keep myself amused and interested as a way of making sure I just keep sketching because I make light of it now. But at the time, it was pretty touch and go for me having to switch over completely from watercolor to iPad drawing as a renderer. And now I'm using all these fantastic tools in Procreate to cut and paste sections of the plan and move them around because I have to make these guest bedrooms work better and add a bathroom in between those two bedrooms. And I believe in small bedrooms, as some of you may recall from my other videos, because they address both cost and I think there's a social component to them. And if the bedroom's too wonderful and grand, I mean, the kid's never going to come out of your bedroom, so they're never going to spend time with the family. At least that's what I tried to tell my kids. And this was an idea for a second home, so I don't really need a bathtub in that kid's bathroom. I'm going to just put a shower in. But I am going to spoil the clients and give them a slightly nicer primary bedroom suite, so a little bit nicer than you would find in a second home. And all of you that know my tricks, you see me making kind of a freehand running tally of the square footages of these different areas, and it's coming in at under 1,250 square feet, which I am very excited about. And if it seems I'm obsessed with finding economical solutions, I should explain that I went to architecture school back in the Carter years during the recession and the Iran hostage crisis that led to the Arab oil embargo, which many of you are too young to remember and will have to look up. But during those years, architecture jobs were few and far between, and you had to be very clever about creating architecture out of almost nothing. And I came to see architecture during those years and to this day as the allocation of resources. In other words, every future building might be represented by a huge container that contains the materials and the labor required to build that building. And it's up to us architects to unpack that container and allocate those resources as cleverly as possible, because a building can cost the same, but either be a great building or a very average building. Now, you saw the quick sketch of the great room before, but I also wanted to take a look at the primary bedroom suite and see what it was like to look out through the windows to that courtyard beyond. And this was the first time I ever used the Procreate perspective drawing guide, which I was thrilled about. So I set it up to have two vanishing points, one very extreme one on the left and a more gentle one on the right. And this came together very quickly. I didn't do a preliminary sketch. I just used the perspective drawing guide to help me lay it out. And to be perfectly honest, I got very lucky. And then you can see me using these brushes on new layers to sort of do a wash, kind of like a marker wash of color, just to evoke exactly what I was hoping for. And it's just an incredibly effective thing. And I think this is when my eyes really began to open about, oh my goodness, this is going to be a great thing, this iPad drawing. And remember, you can download the original Procreate files of every drawing you see in this video in the description below. So that should be really helpful to see the layers and even activate the video replay at your own leisure. So that was a pretty basic exercise, but the second test house that I did was based on my love for the early residential work of Alvar Aalto and the Danish architect Arne Jacobsen. And I love the angles that they introduce into a kind of a strict orthogonal international style. So I wanted to do a house that kind of evoked that and keep practicing developing my own voice. And again, this all comes back to using your iPad as a sketchbook and this idea of there's no other way to actually develop your voice than to keep working at it through travel sketches and imaginary designs you make on your own time. So again, this began as these scribbles off to the side, but then to try and see what it looked like, I began using that perspective drawing assist guide again. And once again, you can see this superpower of iPad drawing and allowing you to work on any of these aspects at a time. The plan to a kind of like a 3D axon to a perspective rendering. And again, I'm playing around with the brushes. I'm using that rectangular selection mode we've talked about in the past to define a field, and then I run my brushes right up to that. So it gives it a very quick finished appearance. And here you see more work with the perspective drawing assist. Adding some dormers, again, finding the voice or looking for my voice. And it's an outrageous project, and it was meant to be only experimental and not to be real. But also as a way to develop these techniques that were going to replace my watercolor rendering techniques. So you can see me literally dragging and dropping new colors into where the monotone blue colors were before in that black and white or that shaded sketch. And I'm just playing with ideas. I'm really still smitten with this idea when architects used to put their perspectives and their plans and their sections all on one page in this kind of magazine brochure style. That's something about Procreate is the rendering style is more akin to silkscreen almost, and kind of a vintage magazine look. So I'm trying to exploit that and not deny it and insist on making watercolor renderings, but I'm really trying to develop a new rendering style and a new design style that is native to the iPad, so to speak. And now I've created this huge, great room at the very end of this project. I have no idea if it works, so I do a quick plan and just check that out. And the same goes for the section. You can take these sections that you begin as tiny scribbles. On the left-hand side of the page, you see them, and just blow it up, copy it, blow it up, and then begin to trace a more refined section over the top of it. So this is a big part of this process that I'm discovering. And that coupled with this select and fill idea of quickly getting some rendered color over the project makes this a very powerful tool for preparing these quick design sketches just before a meeting or as leading up to a meeting. And even though I'm doing these designs for no client in mind, it's at this point that I realize that this elevation, this new section, and this new look of this project has quite a similarity to the original cabin drawing I've done. So this is what I mean by how a sketchbook helps you find your design voice, how you begin to see patterns in your own work that might help other future projects. So now I'm kind of retrofitting. I brought in the cabin plan, and I'm kind of studying the section to see if this would actually line up. And I'm quite encouraged by what I see because it's a different kind of exposed roof. There's no longer that exposed gable, but now it's kind of a modern single slope, low pitch roof that updates this whole idea of a cabin in the woods. And it's also very similar to those architects that I admired, the Alvar Aalto house and the Arne Jacobsen houses of the early 60s. So I study the elevation once again, ad infinitum, as they say. And I'm trying to break up these things with windows that are creative but respect the kind of overall form, the overall angular form. It's almost a Mondrian type look, and you can see me experimenting with all kinds of things, introducing angles. This is when I realized that maybe I could extend the roof. There's no program back there yet, but maybe there's some garage or something that allows me to extend the roof backwards to the north, off to the left side of the page that you're looking at. And this is where this idea of actually skiing down the roof begins to develop. It's crazy. And that's a good foreshadowing of future development of this project, but I don't pursue it yet because this is years before this client shows up with this interest in a house that'll be fun for his kids and his grandchildren. But what I do pursue is this idea of passive solar gain, because that's a very strong value of mine, design value of mine. So I'm quickly studying how deeply the sun penetrates back in so it can warm up the radiant concrete floors. And this is going to present some challenges. If you look at that front porch there, that south-facing porch, how do I keep the rain out of that porch, but also create the perfect angle for the sun to get back in there in the winter? So that's another thing to consider. Now I'm going back in and looking at the structure of this thing. Is there a way to make the trusses over the great room somehow integrated with the trusses that are holding up the overhang of the south-facing porch? And even though this project is pure fantasy right now, I'm still thinking about how I am going to hold up all this sod roof and how that structure might affect the aesthetics of this project. I think they're going to be fantastic because I love looking up at a very robustly framed barn, anything with a very strong structure that really imparts a whole character to a structure. And here I'm quickly studying the north elevation, which is off to the left of this sheet, wondering if there could be a gable dormer window of some kind over a four-season internal courtyard with a hot tub. But again, these layers, you'll see this thing flickering all the time. And what that is turning these layers on and off. These layers accumulate. You don't get rid of them. You keep them around so you can keep studying the design. And as I turn them on and off in real time, of course, they are accelerated by this video replay feature, so it creates that flickering effect. But slowly, what's evolving is a kind of a presentation palette, a presentation style. And again, there's no real client here, but this is going to help me practice in the future for how to quickly convey these design ideas to a client in a very attractive way, or what you hopefully consider an attractive way. And part of that is including colors for the ground and showing the foundations accented in white against that ground color. And that is the final result of this second purely abstract design exercise where I have been learning how to do iPad drawing and also developing my voice. And in our next video, we are going to see how these ideas came back to help me in the present moment from a real client that looked a bit like this couple I created in Mid-Journey, but who wanted to build a memorable second home in a beautiful spot in Maine that was close to golfing and hiking and skiing, so their kids and their grandchildren would constantly come back, and who can blame them for that? Don't forget to tune in next week for the second part of this video, and to go deeper on any of the techniques you saw in this video, be sure to check the links in the description below to the online courses I offer and the digital tools I offer. And to see the next video in this series, click right here. And I'll see you in the next video.